Let's go ahead and go back to our own Chad Pergram now. And Chad, I was just talking with Byron York as we were earlier about how this is going to look moving forward between now and November, and what could happen and what will not happen as far as trying to fill his shoes.
Yeah, well, I think what's going to be very interesting is to see whether or not whoever they appoint is also somebody who wants to be the senator from South Carolina and run in the primary. A lot of times they want to have the same person. They want to have that kind of continuity. We do have caretaker senators. There's one right now. Alan Armstrong is the Republican senator from Oklahoma, after Mark Wayne Mullen was named the Homeland Security Secretary, and he's not running this fall for that position. But there's going to be an election in in Oklahoma this fall, and Alan Armstrong is not part of that. Kevin Hern, the Republican congressman, is running there, and is kind of the odds-on favorite to take that seat in Oklahoma. So we do have these caretaker senators from time to time, and that's something we're probably going to have in this case. But again, whether or not that if you appoint somebody, what that often does is gives them a little bit of a leg up in the primary, and then certainly in the general election. So again, you might have that special election and going on. Again, I'm just kind of struck by the fact that Lindsey Graham had been overseas and was working on this Ukraine deal here. We've just gotten a statement here the past couple of minutes from Tim Scott, who's the other Republican senator from South Carolina. He says, South Carolina lost a statesman, and I've been lost a friend. My prayers are with his sister and the rest of the family. From his humble beginnings to the Senate floor, Lindsey always led with faith, family, and South Carolina first. Lindsey remained committed to public service and doing what he loved. He always introduced levity and brought wit to the most challenging moments. So that is from Tim Scott, the Republican senator from South Carolina. And as you say, he had just been in Ukraine, a couple of days ago. I remember this was not last week, but this was the week before. I think they've been out of session this week, but so it was the week before. The last time I saw Lindsey Graham, I was trying to get a sense of what they were going to try to do, maybe on budget reconciliation. He was coming out of the Capitol, and I chased him out to a car, and he was somebody had pulled a car up, and they were going to take him somewhere. I don't know if it was the White House or where exactly, but he was trying to get in on the wrong side, and he just did not have time to talk. He was in a rush because he was always going somewhere. And as we say, he was just speaking in front of tanks in Ukraine on Friday. And here's what he said when he was over a meeting with Vladimir Zelensky and others in Ukraine. He said, quote, I've never been more optimistic than I am today, than we have the formula to end this war, help Ukraine to be more lethal, let those supporting Russia to know it's going to be a price to be paid if you keep doing it, and try to find an off-ramp not to humiliate Putin, but to end this war so that Ukraine will thrive and survive. And so what you simultaneously have here, too, in addition to this complication about what's going to happen with South Carolina Senate, and I mentioned, budget reconciliation. We talked about that several times since he was the chair of the Budget Committee. But, what is going to happen now in Ukraine when you have somebody who has the president's ear, who is somebody who has been there, has been an advocate on this issue, and then suddenly thinks that they're on a ramp maybe to end this war, and then that person is taken out of the equation. This is probably a blow for ending the war in Ukraine. What does this mean for Iran? As I said earlier, he was maybe one of the biggest advocates in the president's ear, to order the airstrikes starting in late February, and was very concerned the night that they did not have those strikes. In fact, I remember talking to him, because he had pushed for that some weeks before, and they dialed that off. And I was talking to him late at night. The airstrike started about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. And it was about 10 o'clock at night when I talked to him, and I said, well, wait a minute, Senator. I said, it's 6 o'clock in the morning over there. Shouldn't this have already happened if you're going to do that? And he had kind of given me a wink and a nod that this was probably going to happen pretty quickly. But said, they really have this window right now in the next, day or two to do this, and so again, what does this mean for the policy with Iran? Is that, ramps back up, and again, you have, every day or two now, a set of episodes with, shipping being hit in the Strait of Hormuz. again, that changes things. And you just don't have people fill the void right away. It's not like it's imagine being, you have a baseball team and you have some superstar, and then that person goes to another team, or that person is on the injured list or something like that. You just don't fill that void, and that's kind of where we are with Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, Chad, and as you were speaking, we popped up a statement from President Donald Trump where he had only nice things to say, calling Senator Graham one of the greatest people and senators he's ever known. He said he was always working hard, a true American patriot. And as you were just discussing, the foreign policy issues that he was so passionate about, Israel being one of them. We got a statement from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier where he says he's grieving with the American people over the loss of his dear friend, Senator Lindsey Graham. He said in a recent meeting that he was a great friend of Israel and a cherished friend of his. And that Israel has no better friend than Lindsey. What is your take on that and how that might affect policy issues with Israel moving forward?
Well, again, that's another issue. And as one of your other guests said a few moments ago, just the idea that you had Benjamin Netanyahu put out a statement. And I think that demonstrates Graham's commitment to Israel, but also his attention to what was going on with the region, Israel, Iran, whether you agreed with his more hawkish stance on this or not. It demonstrated engagement. And that's going to be the other loss in this, whether you liked Lindsey Graham politically or not. Somebody who had the ability to pick up the phone and talk to Vladimir Zelensky and pick up the phone and talk to Benjamin Netanyahu or somebody else, that just doesn't magically happen. That is something that's cultivated over decades of service, and many of these trips, as I say, he was always going somewhere. In fact, we were always, remarking that we would hear from, sometimes his staff that he was going to be overseas somewhere during a congressional recess, and when we want to have him on, or he was going to have a press conference there, and we would make arrangements to bring in that press conference because we knew there was probably going to be something newsworthy. Some of this wasn't necessarily attention-seeking, but it was probably going to be newsworthy because Lindsey Graham was involved, and sometimes not just because he certainly wasn't the Secretary of State, but he was one of the most influential figures in foreign policy. And so, for the president, he loses a sounding board and an ally, somebody, who had some of those contacts as well. That's a hit for the administration as well.
Yeah, and we discussed earlier, moving forward, how is this process going to look as far as trying to find someone who can sort of take the reins and really represent some of the issues that he was passionate about? Yeah. Does anyone come to mind that you think could just slide in and take over where he left off?
It's not obvious. Again, this comes over time. There are certainly people who come up through the ranks, and I think that's why. In the middle of the night, had we had another senator pass away, we probably would not be in the middle of breaking news at this. This was an outsized senator in terms of his influence. And if you really study the Senate, there have been a number of figures over the years who were never the majority leader, never the minority leader, but always somebody who had that sort of influence. I think of Ted Kennedy. I certainly think of Richard Russell from Georgia. That's the Russell Senate office building. People who had certain sway up there. And Lindsey Graham is probably someone, and John McCain certainly. That's somebody in that vein. People who just weren't another senator. And here's another
Chad,
thing I think to watch.
Chad, I'm going to stop you right here. We're going to take a break, but if you're just joining us, prominent Republican South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham has passed away at the age of 71. His office putting out that statement earlier that he died from a brief and sudden illness. More details should be coming in momentarily. For now, we're going to take a break. Keep it here with Fox News Channel for the very latest on the death of Senator Lindsey Graham.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.